Cletus McFarland is not approved to run the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series race at Talladega Super Speedway, and Nick Sanchez's future remains uncertain as AIM Racing will not be showing up to the racetrack this weekend at Bristol. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and Row Motorsports story discussion today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Dillon's 2026 Ohio Logistics scheme that we'll see this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. I like the look of this car quite a bit, to be honest. I think the yellow, the red, the black all work together pretty good. Colors look really solid. Looking forward to the racetrack this weekend at Bristol. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Bilicki's 2026 10 spot scheme that we'll see this weekend at Bristol. Car's alright in my opinion. It's good to see a new sponsor working with Josh Bilicki. Interesting, they got a spot sponsorship for the weekend. I think it definitely looks okay. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is John Nemechek's 2026 Dollar Tree scheme that we'll see this weekend at Bristol. I like to keep changing up the Dollar Tree scheme quite a bit. You've got the white, you've got the green on it. Honestly, I think the colors on this one look better than some of the other ones they had. I think this one does look pretty solid. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Frankie Muniz' 2026 Malcolm in the Middle scheme that we'll see this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. Pretty cool that Malcolm in the Middle is going to be on the card for Frankie Muniz this year. Also, I do like the blue, and I like that he's got his face on the card. I think his truck does look good. I think it's a nice looking truck. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at was Ryan Preece's 2026 Muscle Milk scheme that we'll see this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. Car's alright in my opinion. Good to see Muscle Milk coming back in, part of the Kroger family. It's also good to see Kroger continue being with the team. It does look alright. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2026 Busch Light Fishing scheme that we'll see this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. There's not really any changes from the 2025 scheme they have for this one. I love the variant of it, though. I do think it looks pretty good, and I do think the organization of Trackhouse knocked it out of the park. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2026 WWE Chumba Casino scheme that we'll see this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. It is awesome to see that WWE will be sponsoring a car for the 2026 year, part of that Chumba Casino brand, which has had a lot of success when it's gone to Victory Lane. Car looks pretty good. The black and white does work very well with this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Corey Heim's 2026 Celsius scheme that we'll see in the Truck Series race on Friday night at Bristol. Truck looks awesome in my opinion. I think Tricon Garage absolutely knocked out of the park. Design looks incredible, and the people there at Tricon always generally do a really good job on their paint schemes. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Hemrick's 2026 R-Not scheme that we'll see, I believe, in a few Truck Series races in 2026. Not the biggest fan of this scheme, to be honest. I don't really love the green and all the other stuff. I get it's part of the branding for it, but to be honest, I think they could have done a better job on the truck, but good news to see a new sponsor working with Daniel Hemrick. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cody Ware's 2026 Costa Oil scheme that we'll see this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. Looks kind of similar one that Barrett Cope Racing had earlier in the year. I think his car actually does look alright with the gold and the black. It does work solidly. Looking forward to his paint scheme out on the racetrack this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Texas Roadhouse. As it was announced earlier today that Texas Roadhouse will sponsor Landon Huffman in the car store race at the Nashville Fairgrounds. In addition to that, High Rock Vodkas will be having some of their branding in the Texas Roadhouse locations across the country. So you got Dale Jr. partnering up with Texas Roadhouse in some way, shape, or form also. This is a really, really big deal. We haven't seen Texas Roadhouse much in motorsports in the last couple years. Of course, they did sponsor some races in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. I think they also sponsored Ben Rhodes at one point in the Truck Series back in 2016 and 2017. I'd be interested to see if maybe we're going to see maybe Texas Roadhouse maybe sponsor one of the junior motorsports cars down the road. I think that would honestly be really cool if that could end up happening. I think it's a really awesome to see and pretty cool. Texas Roadhouse will get the chance and opportunity to sponsor Landon Huffman. I think that's awesome, and I think it's really good stuff and pretty awesome, exciting to see overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Arby's. As it was announced earlier today, the Arby's is signed as a supporting sponsor for the NASCAR Cup Series race at San Diego and Naval Base Coronado. Arby's is one of the new partners that is, of course, coming in for this event. Obviously, some other big sponsors have been coming back in the last couple years, and now you got Arby's coming in to be a supporting sponsor, one of the premier partners for of the NASCAR Cup, O'Reilly and Truck Series races at San Diego. Again, I think it's really awesome to see that Arby's is stepping up this year. Of course, we're working with Junior Motorsports for a lot of races. We saw the Arby sponsorship on Carson Quaffel's car earlier in the year, and we're going to see that in multiple races with the remainder of the Junior Motorsports camp throughout the 2026 year. I think it's really awesome stuff and pretty great to see that Arby's is signed as a supporting sponsor for the race of San Diego. I think that's a really awesome and a major deal for this event overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Polaris. As it was announced earlier today and reported by Adam Stern, that Polaris has signed an endorsement deal with Cletus McFarland for multiple years. Now, the deal, we don't know exactly how long it's going to be, but it's going to be a 2 to 3 year deal with Cletus McFarland. This is a really, really huge deal. Obviously, we got another big Cletus McFarland story that we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit, but this is more a positive story for the Cletus McFarland fans. Polaris has been working with Cletus McFarland, I'm pretty sure, for the last couple years with his brand. And I think it's pretty cool to see that they're upping that brand and partnership going into 2026. And I imagine his ARCA Menard Series races, you're going to see it on his Fire Suit most likely. You're probably going to see it on his YouTube channel as well. And probably some of the Truck Series races that he's going to run later this year, which he did say earlier today. He's got some Truck Series races planned. You're probably going to see that Polaris sponsorship on the truck or whatever car he ends up driving. So really exciting stuff and pretty cool to see that Polaris will be working with Cletus McFarland for quite a bit of time in 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about TNT. As Skid on Twitter basically went and put out a little bit of a teaser thing that came out during some of the stuff that was going on TNT. If you take a look at this, this is a promo commercial for NASCAR on TNT. Notably, some of the names that were in there, I believe it was Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, I believe either Chase Elliott or Bubba Wallace were in the promo as well. And some of the things that happened in the 2025 and 2026 season, they also talked about some of the races going to be on there, including Chicago and Sonoma Raceway as well, which is going to be part of TNT's coverage. On top of that as well, the song Back in the Saddle by Luke Combs is also one of the songs that they are choosing for this year. Makes a lot of sense. Back in the Saddle featured Dale Jr. and Richard Petty in the original music video. I think it's really cool they kind of tied those in together, considering that Luke Combs is a major NASCAR fan who's been involved in NASCAR. I wouldn't be surprised down the road if Luke Combs finds a way to become the owner in the sport in the near and not so distant future. But I think honestly this is a huge deal. We kind of haven't talked about it as much, but a lot of the networks have not been doing a really good job when it comes to promotion. So I think it's cool TNT starting to do some promotion about 2 or 3 months from the start of the year. They need to keep doing that to try to bring people in, because if they can have promos like this, it'll bring people in. I think that's one thing we all want to see is more promotion overall for the sport and the sport to grow as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Gaulding. As it was announced earlier today that Greg Gaulding will drive the number 74 for Mike Harmon Racing this weekend in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway. Greg Gaulding, I believe, has not made a start at any of NASCAR's top 3 divisions in the 2026 year, so I believe this is going to be the first time we're going to see Greg Gaulding behind the wheel. Greg Gaulding, in my opinion, is a pretty underrated NASCAR driver. Yes, I know his time with Roush and development with them for many years kind of struggled a bit in the 20 truck at times, but I will say Greg Gaulding is a talented guy who has shown some good stuff. Reminder, back in 2019, he nearly made the playoffs with the SS Greenlight Racing team. And honestly, he's had some good runs over the years with top-level equipment or mid-pack equipment as well. I'm interested to see how he's going to do because of Mike Harmon Racing team. They've been struggling to make races, though they actually will be able to make the race this weekend because there's no one else going to be going home, especially with AM Racing and Barrett Cope Racing not showing up to the track this weekend. So I'm not sure if he'll have any issues making the show or the event unless they have to, of course, withdraw, which I don't expect them to withdraw, which will be really big for the owners' points because they're switching owners' points sound like once again. So it's a big deal to see this and pretty cool to see Greg Gaulding will be back on the track. Again, I do think Greg Gaulding will have a solid chance and opportunity to be competitive, and I think he'll have a good enough car to show up and do some good things. We'll see if he can potentially get a top 30. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of attrition in the race, that maybe that car could scoot in and potentially get a top 30 this weekend in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Bristol. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Logan Bearden. As it was announced yesterday, that Logan Bearden will drive the number 42 for Young's Motorsports for 3 NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series races in 2026. His first scheduled race is this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. He is going to run the fall Bristol race as well, and then his final race is scheduled at Nashville Super Speedway. Logan Bearden is having a busy year currently at the moment. He is also running, I believe, full-time in the NASCAR Euro Series in 2026. So along with making a few of these starts at Young's Motorsports this year in the number 42, he's also making a few running full-time in the Euro Series currently at the moment. I do expect Logan Bearden to do okay. I think Logan Bearden is an underrated race car driver. He's done some good things, especially in O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. I think he 1 point drove for Joey Gase Motorsports and contended for top 20s at points, I'm pretty sure, with that team. So I do think Logan Bearden does have a solid chance and opportunity to at least do a decent job. I think Young's Motorsports is certainly a better organization than a team like Joey Gase Motorsports. So I could absolutely see Logan Bearden having a solid chance and opportunity to be pretty competitive. I'm looking forward to see what he can do this weekend at the track. I think the team's going to bring some pretty good equipment, and I think we'll have a solid chance and opportunity to be up front contending for a potential decent finish this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway and a couple of the races that he's going to run later in the season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bristol. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass earlier today, the Bristol Motor Speedway will have a new tire for the events for this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. This tire is going to come from the November tire test that happened at Bristol Motor Speedway with Bubba Wallace and Alex Bowman, and also they will have from the wheel force test they had in March as well. In addition to that, they are going to be applying PJ1 for all three events, the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race on Friday night, the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series race on Saturday night, and then the NASCAR Cup Series race on Sunday afternoon as well. When you hear this stuff, I do get a little bit nervous. One of the things that was mentioned, the reason they're doing this is because they're trying to not have any weather impact. If you watch some of the races that have happened at Bristol the last couple of years, it's the spring race in 2024, and the fall race of 2025, you saw that there was a lot of tire wear in those events because of track, and there was really no rubber going on the track. I think a lot of people want to see the chaos in a sense, and while I don't always want to see the chaos at the track, I have a little worry that these tires are going to be bricks, and we're probably not going to get the most exciting racing because, while yes, you don't always want to see chaotic races every single time, it felt to me like the last time we ran here, it felt like old school Bristol for the NASCAR Cup Series event. It was without question the best race of the weekend. I feel like the racing has been very hit or miss at Bristol though, and if you have to have PJ1 on the track, it really shows that the track has its own issues and problems that certainly do need to be fixed. But I do think the racing, like I said, has certainly been very, very inconsistent in the track. And I'm worried that the racing for this weekend at Bristol is not going to be good, and it's going to be a pretty big struggle. So we'll see what happens in regards to the racing this weekend at Bristol. I'm hoping for the love of God it can be good racing, but I'm not expecting it to be. I think it could be a really big struggle, and it could be a chore to get through. If the race is not good, it could be where to get the lead, you're probably not going to get past because dirtier is probably going to be a factor, even though they're going to have the short track package this weekend at Bristol. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about JJ Yeley. As it was announced yesterday that JJ Yeley will drive the number 5 for Hettinger Racing this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. I believe this will be the third or fourth time in a row that we've seen JJ Yeley behind the wheel of the number 5 car. Now, obviously, of course, there's been a lot of rumors circulating around this team. It was mentioned on Door Bumper Clear that it sounds like this team might be looking to take some off weeks coming up in the next few events. We weren't sure if they actually were going to be at Bristol Motor Speedway, but it sounds like from what Tommy Baldwin said, of course, the competition director at Rick Ware Racing currently at the moment, he indicated there was a chance the team may not even show up at Bristol. So it's good to see they'll at least be on the racetrack this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. But realistically, I do think there's a good chance and opportunity that they may end up not running after this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. If they don't show up after Bristol this weekend, and AM Racing doesn't find a way to get the sponsorship funding that they're going to need to continue, there is a very realistic chance and possibility that we may see no Fords on the racetrack going forward, at least for the foreseeable future. Someone, I think, brought this up. The last time where there were no Fords in the field, I believe was back in 1991. In the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. That was 35 years ago, and Ford is certainly in a lot of trouble currently at the moment. And I like JJ Yeley a lot. When you have to resort to JJ Yeley as your driver, they have to bring into the program. That's never a good sign of your team is in the best position. I'm worried about Ford currently at the moment and their long-term. Yes, I don't think it's just a Ford issue. I think the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series is having a lot of funding issues and funding problems currently at the moment, as a lot of drivers can't even run full-time, like Nick Sanchez, for example, because he doesn't have the funding and sponsorship, and his deal with AM came out the last minute. But going back to JJ Yeley, I think JJ will have a decent run potentially. I think he's got a good chance to show some good stuff. We'll see what happens this weekend for JJ Yeley. But like I said, I do think he's got a good chance for maybe a top 20 like he got at Darlington. We'll see what happens, and we'll see if he can actually have a solid and really good run this weekend in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Bristol. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the tire test from Chicagoland Speedway. Now, we've already talked about the story on the channel a little bit from last week. We weren't entirely sure which drivers were going to be participating in the tire test at Chicagoland. We have found out which of these drivers will be participating in it. For the NASCAR Cup Series, since the Truck Series will not be there, it'll be Ryan Blaney for Ford, Denny Hamlin for Toyota, and Kyle Larson for Chevrolet. For the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, Justin Allgaier is currently listed as a driver for the Chevrolet camp. Brandon Jones is currently listed for the Toyota camp. And Ford is a little bit unknown at this moment. It is listed that Nick Sanchez is supposed to test in 2 weeks at Chicagoland. But right now, it's very much unknown if he's even going to be in that car going forward. And even if AIM Racing is going to show up, and there may not even be any Fords, they're going to be testing in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. So maybe they're going to get an extra driver to go unless they can find a way to get a Penske car or something like that to go out there and test. Maybe one of the Penske drivers in the Cup Series can go down and do that test. I think it's a big deal, though. The fans are going to be allowed to go in. I do wish this was an organizational test and not just where like 3 or 4 cars are going to get on the racetrack. I wish it was like an organizational test like North Wilkesboro was, where everyone could get on the tracks. It's been a long time since they ran there. I mean, it's been 7 years at this point. So I wish that was the direction they were going with that. But at the same token, same time, I do think it's good to see that they're going back to Chicago for the first time in quite some time. I do think the race is actually going to be really, really good this week, that weekend, especially with the older track and the older surface. We could be in for a really strong and really fun show. I'm looking forward to it, and once again, excited to see that we got tire tests happening there. Wish I could make it out there. Can't make it out there, unfortunately, but I think it's good nonetheless to see that the tire test is happening in Chicago. I think it could be a really fun test for fans that are going to be out at the racetrack during that week in Chicago in about 2 weeks from now. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Front Row Motorsports. As it was announced yesterday that Front Row Motorsports will not appeal the disqualification from Rockingham. We've talked about this on the channel a couple times. A reminder, Chandler Sip was disqualified from the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Rockingham Speedway after initially crossing the finish line in 4th position. The reason that Chandler Swift was disqualified for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, there was something on the rear spoiler, I'm pretty sure that might have been messed with, if I'm not mistaken, in the rear and back of the truck. And because of that, they were disqualified. This means that because they will not be appealing the disqualification, this means that Chandler Swift will drop from having the points lead down to 3rd or 4th in the points. What this also means is that Corey Heim, who's missed 2 races this year, he is currently tied for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series points lead. And with him running the Truck Series race at Bristol, he is looking to go 3 in a row and win 3 straight Truck Series races, which I think he's got a good chance and opportunity, albeit there's a lot of really good Cup Series competition that is going to be in the field. Some of those we're going to be talking about here in just a short little bit. But for Front Row, this is definitely, they've had a couple disqualifications the last couple years. You go back to Atlanta last year with Lane Riggs, they had a DQ then. I don't think they appealed it if I remember correctly, but they had a DQ at that point. And it seems like this team's having a lot of DQs at this point. Like also Lane Riggs last year at Kansas. After crossing the finish line in 2nd, they got disqualified. I'm not sure what they're trying to find, whether it's an advantage to try to make the cars faster and stronger because they're trying to keep up with those Tricon trucks. Those Tricon trucks seem to be very, very quick every single week, but I still think nonetheless it is a pretty big deal that Front Row Motorsports will not appeal DQ. I'm not entirely shocked about it because I think it was going to be very difficult for them to win the DQ altogether, their appeal on that, but I do think it's kind of a big deal and kind of crazy to see they will not appeal it, and now they're moving forward and trying to get better on the track and perform better every single week so they can have a chance and opportunity. They don't have to get an advantage all the time, and they're trying to perform the best they can to keep up with the Tricon trucks, which seems like they're the best trucks every single week at this particular point. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, Kyle Larson very recently appeared on the Speed podcast with Will Buxton and Kevin Harvick. And there were a lot of interesting topics that were brought up on that same podcast that happened. And one thing got talked about is a lack of respect that NASCAR gets across the world. Of course, in the United States, NASCAR gets a lot of respect. It is the most viewed sport in the United States, at least for racing, I should say. But when it comes to other racing outside the United States, NASCAR is not respected by a lot of people in Europe. And you always hear a lot of negative jokes that are brought the way to NASCAR, especially from fans of Formula One. Well, Kyle Larson said that he is hoping the rest of the world will agree that NASCAR and give NASCAR respect that it deserves. And he says that everyone in the Americas basically is NASCAR outside of the USA, there isn't a ton of respect. Now, Daniel Suarez had to kind of come in and make a comment about it because he says America is a lot of the world. I know what Kyle Larson meant. He generally meant the USA. I don't know why Suarez had to interject and make those comments there. I felt like that was unnecessary to make that comment. I think anyone could have used context and understood the point what Larson was making, which he was making a very good point. But yeah, I entirely agree with Kyle Larson on this. I feel like when you look at Formula One fans especially, a lot of Formula One fans diss NASCAR a lot. A lot of them, especially when Kyle Larson said he feels like he's a better all-around driver than Max Verstappen, which I still think to this day that Kyle Larson is a better all-around driver than Max Verstappen. Not the greatest driver in the world, but a better all-around driver. A lot of people are starting to say that Kyle Larson is the quote-unquote best driver in the world, which Kyle Larson never said he was the best driver in the world, and he's had to reiterate that multiple times. But because Max Verstappen's won 4 Formula One championships, everyone thinks the best driver in the world is Max. Guess what? Max Verstappen is also having his own struggles currently at the moment. He hasn't won a Formula One race this year and hasn't even come close to having a chance and opportunity to win a race in Formula One in 2026. And there's even rumors right now that Max Verstappen is going to retire at the end of the 2026 year just because he's frustrated with the way things are going on in Formula One. But I think that NASCAR does deserve a lot more respect. And I really hope down the road NASCAR can get that respect they really deserve, because when you look at the racing, especially in NASCAR, we can all agree when it comes to racing product, I think NASCAR puts on a better racing show than most sports. It puts on a better show than IndyCar most of the time. It puts on a better show racing-wise than Formula One especially. Sometimes does better than IMSA. I just think NASCAR has a better racing product than other racing series at this point. It's not perfect. I think the next-gen car has some of those issues that do need to be fixed to make the racing product even better than it can be. But I think when it comes to the racing product, NASCAR puts on a really good show, is consistently the best when it comes to racing, in my opinion, and I do truly think that NASCAR deserves more respect. There's been drivers in NASCAR who have been dissed. Even people when Connor Zilch was winning a lot of races were dissing Zilch from the Formula One side, when Connor Zilch probably could have come into Formula One and had more sex than half the drivers that are in Formula One currently at the moment. That's just my opinion. But I think NASCAR does deserve a lot more respect than they get, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Rockingham ratings. And honestly, they are pretty good. As it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today that the CW got a 0.65 rating and 1.165 million viewers for Saturday's NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series race at Rockingham. That is up 12% and 11% respectively from 2025. That is a major and massive increase for the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. That means they nearly got almost 100,000 more viewers than they got last year, and their rating jumped, I believe, about 5 or 6 points or percentage points than they got in 2025 as well. If you look at the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series this year consistently, their numbers have been going up. Whether it's 1% or 5% or 10%, it doesn't matter. Every single race outside of one this year has either been flat or up in 2026. There hasn't been really any race in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series that have been down. You compare that to the NASCAR Cup Series, where outside of 2 races so far this year, every race has either been flat or down from the 2025 year. Now, why is the case why the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series is growing, why the NASCAR Cup Series is fading? Well, one, the NASCAR Cup Series goes to so many different channels. On one week, you can be on Fox. The next week, you can be on FS1. There's no consistency, and they're all on different networks at the same time. You compare that to the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. You know where the races are going to be every single week. They're going to be on one network, the CW. So you're going to have consistency. That is going to lead to more people watching the network and more people not going over and trying to find Cup. Second thing, the racing in O'Reilly Auto Parts Series competition, generally, in my opinion, is much better than the NASCAR Cup Series. Sure, the Cup Series, in my opinion, has some better racing this year at times than the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. But in my opinion, the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series has been the best when it comes to racing. And it feels old school at this point, which is what a lot of old school fans really like, is that kind of racing. I also think the Cletus McFarland effect, I think, certainly comes into play. I think there was an uptick in ratings for this week because you had Cletus McFarland in the race. If Cletus wasn't in, I don't think you'd get a 12 to 13% increase. You might get maybe a 5% increase, but you're probably not going to get a massive increase at this point. But I do think when it comes to the ratings for the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, I think it's been a huge year this year. I mean, the Truck Series, they've had up at times, but they've been down on their ratings this year. But the Cup Series, I just think having all different races and all different networks every other week having 12 channels, something like that you got to go to throughout the year. I don't think fans really like or enjoy that, and I think fans want that consistency every single week, and they're not getting that, and I think that's why there's some frustration and why you're seeing a decrease in fans of NASCAR at this point. So, though, I think NASCAR needs to work to try more race on linear networks and over-the-air, because having over-the-air races and over-the-air network events is going to lead to increase in ratings on the Cup Series side. I think that will help the Cup numbers go up, in my opinion, if we can have those races every single week. And now we're going to head to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Christopher Bell. As it was announced yesterday that Christopher Bell will drive the number 62 truck for Homer Friesen Racing this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. This will be, I believe, the second time that Christopher Bell strapped behind the wheel of the number 62 truck in the 2026 year. Christopher Bell did make a start at Darlington Raceway a couple weeks back, actually led a few laps in the number 62 truck, but the team could not really keep up with the adjustments, and they faded back throughout the field. The truck was super loose, and there were a lot of times where Bell was almost running outside the top 10, even outside the top 11 or 12 throughout the race, and they nearly won a lap that at one point in the event, but they made the truck stronger, and Bell, I believe, nearly had a chance and opportunity to go out there and pick up the win in the Craftsman Truck Series race. Now, unlike Darlington, though, where Christopher Bell has been a low hit or miss at that track, Christopher Bell is historically very, very good at Bristol Motor Speedway. Reminder, he's the defending winner of the NASCAR Cup Series race at that track, and Bell's come close to winning other races in the Cup Series at this track as well. So I think having that experience and being better at this track, I think that is going to lead to Christopher Bell having a really strong chance and a very good opportunity to compete for the win. Though I will say, like I mentioned before, the Homer Friesen race team, they're not one of the fastest teams out there. I mean, I know Stuart Friesen had a pretty good run this past week at Rockingham, but that 52 truck is a better truck than the 62 truck is. I think Christopher Bell, though, is going to contend for a top 10, but you have a very stacked field going into the weekend. We'll get to all the drivers that are going to be in the field for the Cup or the Truck Series race here in just a short little bit. But I do think that Bell is going to have a good opportunity to contend for a top 5 or top 10. He hasn't won a Truck Series race, I think, in like a decade. I'm pretty sure it's been a long time since Bell has gone to victory lane. I'm not sure if he's going to win a Truck Series race this weekend, but I think he is certainly going to have a solid truck for sure. I expect Homer Friesen Racing to give him what he needs. I think that he'll do what he can to be up front pretty consistently, and I think he'll have a good chance to get a good finish. I think he's going to have a good opportunity here, and I do expect that he will be one of the favorites to contend for a potential good run. We'll see what Christopher Bell can do. We'll see if he can be a factor and a contender for the win and victory in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race. I think he's got a good chance, but like I said, there's a lot of really strong competition that's going to come into play and is going to play a part in who goes to victory lane in the Craftsman Truck event this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway, which is coming up on Friday night, an exciting time for fans of the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series to see a lot of these Cup guys going to be out there. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Talladega Super Speedway. Now, earlier tonight, there are a couple things that were announced on the Holler Talk. We'll get to the Cletus McFarland news in just a short little bit. But one thing that's kind of gone under the radar with the Cletus McFarland news is they announced some new things that are becoming into procedure for Talladega this weekend and other super speedway races going forward. As they announced on the Holler Talk, that NASCAR will be shortening the final 2 stages at Talladega Super Speedway. They're going to have a much longer stage 1. I think they're going to be increasing stage number 1 almost up to about 100 laps. I think something like half the race is going to be in stage number 1, and stage 2 and stage 3 are going to be shorter than what they have been in the past. The reason NASCAR is doing this is to try to mitigate all the fuel saving that has been going on in NASCAR Cup competition. If you've been noticing with the super speedway racing, especially with the next gen car, there has been a lot of fuel saving that has been going on every single time. And a lot of fans, including myself, have been complaining quite a bit about the fuel saving that has been going on. So what is NASCAR's other solution that they are going to be looking towards? Let's fast forward to January of 2027. For the first time since, I believe, 2014, when testing was pretty much banned around that point, NASCAR is bringing back preseason thunder in 2027. What they'll be doing is they'll be testing new ways to try to make the super speedway racing better and try to get it, the fuel saving mitigated, and trying to test different packages, among other things as well. First of all, I got to say, I'm glad that NASCAR is finally starting to address some of the issues, and they're going to be having a test at the preseason test. Because let's be real honest, NASCAR has really not done a lot of work with the super speedway racing. I think outside of the short track racing, the super speedway racing, in my opinion, has been the weakest when it comes to racing. When we had the Gen 6 car, yes, You had a lot of big wrecks and a lot of crashes. You still get that with the next-gen car. But the racing was consistently not very fun to watch. And especially with a lot of complaints after the Daytona 500 with the grid we saw and a lot of drivers like Dale Jr. and Denny Hamlin complaining about it, I think that NASCAR finally said, hey, enough is enough. We do have to do something. I think the most exciting part about this is preseason Thunder coming back. Like I said, I believe the last time they did preseason Thunder was back in 2014, right before the new TV deal came into play in 2015 until the end of 2024. I think preseason Thunder is one of the more iconic things that happened before because it's going to create more storylines. It's going to kind of bring that Speed Weeks feel back. I mean, there's even rumors right now that the Cookout Clash might be going back to Daytona for 2027. NASCAR might be looking to try to make the Speed Weeks a little bit longer. When you have something like preseason Thunder happen, you're going to have more of that opportunity to build up the Daytona 500 and make it better because the more on-track activity, the better it is. Look at the Indy 500. The reason Indy 500 is so successful and why it's been successful for as long as it's been and why many consider the biggest motorsports event in the world is because there's more practice done in Indianapolis than any other series currently at the moment. You get testing and all that stuff that happens every time. More on-track activity, to me, the better. And I think this is the way it needs to go overall because, again, we need as much on-track activity as possible to try to make the racing as good as it can be. Because to me right now, the racing and NASCAR Cup competition isn't great. As for the fuel saving and shortening the stages, get rid of sage Ls. I've said this for a while. We need to get rid of sage cautions. I don't know if NASCAR is going to get rid of them in 2026. But honestly, why not just try to run a full race, have the sages be there, but don't have the sage Ls? Because that, I think, is one of the catalysts to the issues of the racing product being a problem because they're racing to the sage Ls, and I think that's one thing in NASCAR could look at this point is getting rid of the sage Ls because I truly think that will help the racing get a little bit better at this point. So I really hope they can find a solution to get the racing to be as good as it can be. Right now, I think the racing is super inconsistently not great at super speedways right now, and I think it needs to be better. Try to make it like Atlanta, but in my opinion, getting rid of sage Ls will be one of the things that makes a solution and fix the problem that NASCAR has currently at the moment, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Legacy Motor Club and TJ Puchyr. Now, we all remember there was a lawsuit that happened between Legacy Motor Club and Rick Ware Racing last year that started on April 1st. Legacy Motor Club had claimed they were supposed to have a charter deal that was supposed to go through at the beginning of the year in 2025 that was supposed to go into play for 2026. Rick Ware Racing backed out of that deal, and that lawsuit lasted for a while. But then they end up settling the case eventually where Rick Ware Racing was supposed to pay $45 million for that charter Legacy. And we now know that Legacy Motor Club is going to expand to a 3-car operation for the 2027 year. Where right now the favorite for that ride is Riley Herbst currently at the moment. Well, there's another key piece of this whole thing. The one who tried to broker the deal, TJ Puchyr. Now, TJ Puchyr was one of the co-founders of Spire Motorsports. But at the end of 2025, I believe, he ended up leaving, I think 2024, he ended up leaving that group over there, and it became Jeff Dickerson who became the president of that group. Now we've had some big updates. TJ Puchyr alleges that Legacy owes 7.5% of Dollar Tree's commission and sponsorship money that they get every single week for every NASCAR race they have. In addition to that, he says himself that he did not claim that he did not do anything illegal in regards to the purchases of those charters and the sales that were going on. Reminder, TJ Puchyr was claiming that he was going to pay a ton of money and was looking to expand Rick Ware Racing to a 3-car operation. But everybody really knew what was going on. Basically, TJ Puchyr was the one who's trying to broker the Legacy Motor Club deal to get that 3rd charter, and he was basically trying to join the side of Rick Ware Racing at that point, and was trying to expand and keep that charter to keep a 3-car deal, and was going to keep Cody Ware on and Rick Ware in the organization. I think we all knew the fact that Cody Ware and Rick Ware were going to be part of this group. Told me he was trying to basically find a way to keep himself in it and keep this deal going so Rick Ware could have 2 cars for the 2026 years. He wanted to expand to a 3-car group. I think this lawsuit side of things is going to be interesting. I think we all kind of thought this lawsuit was pretty much done with the Rick Ware side, but now I got TJ Puchyr getting involved, and I don't know if Rick Ware is going to really want to be involved in this case, considering they may have to be witnesses to the Joe Gibbs Racing and Jeff Dickerson and the Spire stuff with Chris Gabehart also here in the future. They're trying to get people from that group like Tommy Ball to be witnesses at this point. So that's going on behind the scenes also. In regards to this lawsuit with Legacy Motor Club and TJ Puchyr, I find it to be certainly very, very interesting. And I think things are going to get more interesting on that front as time progresses and goes on. It certainly could be more wide open in the future. It'll be interesting to see what happens, and I'll be keeping an update on the story as time progresses and goes on, because to me, I think it's kind of actually a pretty big story that we may have more losses going on. It'll also be interesting to see who ends up getting that third car for Legacy Motor Club in a 2026 NASCAR Cup season. Again, Riley Herb's the favorite, but Jesslove could also end up in that ride for 2027 as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, we talked about the story on the channel yesterday, but it was announced yesterday afternoon that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. will be driving the number 4 truck for Nice Motorsports this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. This will be the third time we've seen Ricky Stenhouse Jr. behind the wheel of a Nice Motorsports truck. He ran the first 2 races of the 2026 season in the 45 truck, where he scored back-to-back top 10 finishes, finished 6th at Daytona International Speedway, and finished 9th at Atlanta, and had a chance and opportunity to win the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race for both those events. He will be running this race at Bristol. In addition to that, he has 2 other starts that are scheduled. John Newby reported yesterday that he'll be racing at Michigan later in the year and also be racing at Charlotte Motor Speedway as well. Meaning that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. by the end of this year will have made 5 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series appearances. Now, I would imagine that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. more than likely is going to be in the number 4 truck for those other 2 events, even though I believe Connor Hall has a couple starts scheduled in the 4 truck for the remainder of the year as well. As for Stenhouse, this honestly would be is someone who could absolutely be a sleeper pick for this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. Sure, in recent years, Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s numbers at the track have not been very good, but back in the early to mid-2010s, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was honestly really, really good at this track. He won multiple times here in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, I'm pretty sure, and in the Cup Series, I remember back in 2016 when he drove for Roush, where he finished in the runner-up position behind Kevin Harvick, and led last multiple different times, had chances and opportunities to win multiple times at that track. I would imagine that Stenhouse is going to be a big factor and contender for the win and victory in this race potentially, but there's a lot of really strong competition that is running this race. You have Kyle Busch, who is driving the number 7 truck for Spire. You have Daniel Suarez, who's making his first truck start in 5 years in the number 71. You got other big names like Carson Osborne back in the Truck Series this weekend at Bristol in the 77. You have Ross Chastain, who is driving a number 45 truck this weekend, teammates with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. You've also got a driver we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit, driving a number 5 truck. You've got other big names like Christopher Bell racing this weekend. And on top of that as well, you've got the regulars of Corey Heim and one truck who's basically a regular at this point, it seems like, and Caden Honeycutt, who's going to be driving the 11 truck full-time. And then you have Lane Riggs, who is full-time in the Truck Series currently at the moment, 34. And Chandler Smith, the defending winner of the spring race at the track. He's going to be a big factor and contender for the potential win and victories. He's won there multiple times, twice in trucks, once in the 18 for Kyle Busch Motorsports, and in the 38 truck for Row Motorsports as well. I think Stenhouse, though, could be one to watch this week and could potentially get another top 10. It's still going to be tough to beat a couple of those guys like Kyle Busch and Corey Heim, and a driver, like I said, we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But I do truly think that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is getting a great opportunity. It's going to bring that veteran experience. And this could be a potential landing spot for 2027. We've heard rumors that Hayek Motorsports may or may not be looking at. We've heard rumors they may be one of the teams that could sell a charter out to RFKs. RFK is going to be wants to keep being a 3-car team. And Hayek has worked in the past with that organization over there, RFK, especially when they had Ryan Preece and Chris Buescher over at the JTG Doherty team at one point when they were JTG Doherty. So I could absolutely see Stenhouse potentially being a free agent at the end of the year. He could go to the 71 for Spire, the 7-car next year, but I think he could also be a candidate to be a full-time Truck Series driver in Nice Motorsports. And I think it'd be fun to see him be a full-time driver in trucks because I think he actually would have a really good chance and opportunity to compete for the overall win and compete for the overall victory if he does get that chance and opportunity. So, though I think it's a fun opportunity with this team, I expect it to be a pretty big factor and contender. I think he's got a good shot to do it, and I think he'll be one to watch out for this weekend in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race this weekend at Bristol as he makes his 3rd start of 2026. And again, he'll have more starts in the series with the team later this year as well. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Briscoe. As it was announced earlier today that Chase Briscoe will drive the number 5 truck for Tricon Garage this weekend in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway. This will be the first time that Chase Briscoe has competed in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series since 2023 when he drove a Bristol Dirt. And the last time he drove on pavement was back in 2021. So it's been 5 years since the last time he's driven the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series on pavement. This is definitely a really big surprise. I was not sure if Chase Briscoe was going to make a start in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series once again, but I am very, very much excited about this. He's going to be joining a team like Tricon Garage, and this will be the first time he has driven for a Toyota in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Every time he has driven a truck, he has driven for a Ford organization, whether it's 04 truck for Rover Racing at one point or driving for Thor Sport Racing. Now, Chase Briscoe does have 2 wins in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2017 at Homestead Miami Speedway for Brad Keselowski Racing, and then 2018 at the Eldora Dirt Derby when he won the Truck Series race at Eldora back in 2018. Kyle Larson, of course, on the call for that event with FS1. But going back to Briscoe, he's going to have some really strong competition to go up against in this race. Because this 5 truck has, of course, gone to victory lane with Corey Haim so far in 2026 at Darlington Raceway. But we talked about some of the drivers who are running the Truck Series race. You got Kyle Busch, who is driving a 7 truck for Aspire Motorsports. You have Daniel Suarez, who's making his first truck start since 2021. He drove for Nice. He'll, of course, be driving the number 71 for Spire Motorsports, and Carson Hocevar, who might be teammates with both these guys, we already know that, for next year, with the 77 truck for Spire Motorsports. Where Ross Chastain, he's in the 45 truck for Nice Motorsports this weekend. Then, of course, you have Corey Haim, who's a part-time Cup guy at this point, driving the 1 truck for Tricon Garage this weekend, who has one of the favorites to go pick up that win and pick up the victory. Then, of course, you have Cursor Bell, who's driving a 62 truck for Homer Friesen Racing. On top of that as well, you've got other big names like your Lang Riggses, like your Caden Honeycutts, like your Daniel Hemricks, your Christian Nakes, who's been really good at short tracks, Chandler Smith, who's won at Bristol Motor Speedway. It is a very, very stacked field. But for Chase Briscoe, one of the reasons I think he is running this race is to try to get more laps at this track. Chase Briscoe's numbers at Bristol have been pretty hit or miss in the Cup Series, whenever it's for Stewart Haas Racing. Yes, he was actually pretty good in the Cup Series race last year in Bristol, I'm pretty sure during the fall, but wasn't one of the favorites to pick up the win in victory. I think he had some issues with tires, if I remember correctly, in that race. But I think Chase Briscoe coming down and getting the experience is very important. I think one of the other questions we have to ask ourselves is, will this be the only time we see Chase Briscoe behind the wheel in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series? I would not be surprised or shocked if we see Briscoe make another start in the Truck Series at some point. There will not be I don't believe there's going to be a Truck Series race at Kansas later in the year, but you got some races coming up for trucks soon. You got Charlotte. I could see him around the Charlotte race. He's been pretty good there in the past. I could see him running National Super Speedway. That's a track I think he would like to get more experience at, so he could do that, because there's been a lot of comparisons from the NASCAR Craftsman truck to the NASCAR Cup car with the next-gen car, so I could absolutely see him looking to do that at this point. But I also think he wants to win more Truck Series races. I think that's one of his goals, to go out there, get more truck wins, and get that experience out there, especially since you don't have a lot of practice for the Cup Series. You get more practice for the trucks at this point than you do for the NASCAR Cup Series. So they get 50 minutes every single week compared to 25 minutes that Cup gets most weeks, except when they have the extra long weekends. Still, though, I think it's pretty awesome to see that Chase Briscoe is coming back in and running in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series again. Again, I do expect Briscoe to have a good chance and opportunity, because Denny Hamlin was supposed to originally drive this truck, I think, in Darlington. He denied that, which is why we got Corey Haim winning the race in Darlington. I think Briscoe wants to go out there and pick up the win and get another win in trucks. He might also look to be with the team at points next year as well, because I do believe he's got a contract with JHR through 2027. He's also just looking for some good luck at this point, because his 19 team has struggled a bit in the NASCAR Cup Series so far this year. So looking for some sort of redemption and looking to run better at this point and get things headed toward the right direction. Good for Briscoe to be back in the series. I think Briscoe will have a solid chance and opportunity, and I do expect Briscoe to be a factor and contender for a really good opportunity to pick up the win and victory in the number 5 truck this weekend in the truck race at Bristol Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we are talking about AM Racing and Nick Sanchez. As it was confirmed yesterday that once again, for the second weekend in a row, AM Racing will not be on the racetrack this weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway. What this means is that Nick Sanchez, for the second weekend in a row, will not be on the racetrack in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series after, of course, missing last week at the race at Rockingham Speedway. This news is very unfortunate. There were a lot of people that were going out and theorizing the reason AM Racing wasn't showing up to the racetrack was so that Cletus McFarland could make the field. I know there were a lot of people believing that rumor, but I believe that rumor is absolutely nonsensical. AM Racing, they've been having a lot of funding issues and problems, and especially since the Haas factory team switched over to Chevrolet for the 2026 year. And then, of course, some other teams went over like RSS Racing. They lost a lot of their funding with Ford, and Ford has not been putting as much support in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series, and AM Racing was pretty much doing everything on their own. Reminder, Sigma Performance Services was supposed to originally buy up this organization for the 2026 year, but like 3 weeks prior to the 2026 season, the purchase basically ended up not going through, and the AM Racing pretty much came back for the 2026 year. Nick Sanchez, who was supposed to be part of that Sigma Performance Services racing organization, he ended up going over to AM Racing. The other big thing that came into play was Daniel Dye. Daniel Dye was supposed to be with the AM Racing team for quite a few races in the 2026 season. But unfortunately, what ended up happening is that ended up not being the case because Daniel Dye, of course, was suspended from Colleague Racing and let go from Colleague Racing. And then Daniel Dye, I don't think AM Racing really wanted to associate with Daniel Dye after everything that kind of happened, where his career is pretty much on hold currently at the moment. That champion container money was really coming to play at that particular point. This means right now that Nick Sanchez's future is very uncertain currently at the moment. Let's go back to last year. Nick Sanchez was having a phenomenal year with the Big Machine Racing team. Gamebridge and Spire were also helping with those cars as well in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series because he had that sponsorship on the car, and Gamebridge is owned by Dan Towers, who is part of that group over there. When it came to Nick, he was originally supposed to be back with the Big Machine Racing team for the 2026 season. But then all of a sudden, we find out after we all thought Nick would be back with the team, we find out pretty much in November going into December that Nick Sanchez is no longer going to be with Big Machine Racing. What happened? Well, someone came in with more funding and came in with more sponsorship, and that would end up being Patrick Sarapoli, who had made very few starts in stock car racing, at least in recent years, who was trying to make a recovery and come back to NASCAR competition after being gone for nearly a decade after being in the ARCA West Series back in 2014 and 2015, making select truck series starts in the 2016 season. Patrick basically took over the ride. And let's be respectful here. Nick Sanchez was competing for wins consistently with Big Machine Racing, contending for top 5s, top 10s every week. Patrick Sarapoli has scored no top 10s and has one top 15 finish so far in 2026 and is sitting outside of the top 15 in points. This car went from being a contender from the chase to barely squaring its way into the top 20 currently at the moment. And I think it is very unfortunate what is happening with Nick Sanchez's career. And I feel like Nick Sanchez is someone, kind of like Corey Heim, for example, who does without question deserve to be full-time in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series or even a NASCAR Series currently at the moment. Because I think Nick Sanchez is very, very talented. But I think the biggest problem here is funding and sponsorship. We're seeing this with a lot of drivers currently at the moment, right? Carson Quaffle is full-time with JRM, at least we all think. He's going through multiple different JRM rides to try to fill up the schedule because they got to have someone that brings funding and sponsorship. But Connor Zolch brings a little bit of that Chevrolet funding, which is why Connor Zolch is part-time into one. And then you have Carson Quaffle splitting between the 1, the 9, and 4 races with DJM Racing. Roger Kroof is also in that same position. He's most of the year in the 88 car, but for 10 races this year, he's in a 32 car for Jordan Anderson Racing. In those races, Rogers has some decent speed, but hasn't had the race-winning speed that he has had so far with an organization like Junior Motorsports, and is coming off having a top 5 finish. And I don't think he'll be competing for the Dasher cash this weekend. It's definitely unfortunate because funding and sponsorship matter so much, and I think the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series is a prime example of a series currently at the moment right now that is really struggling when it comes to series with funding and sponsorship. And I think we all truly want to see this series have success and be extremely successful, and drivers get those opportunities and chances to be full-time that deserve to be full-time in a series. But unfortunately, funding and sponsorship comes into play, and AIM Racing's in a lot of trouble with that. I mean, they had trouble when Hailie Deegan was full-time in the organization, and people say Hailie Deegan was part of the reason the team faded. I don't think Hailie Deegan was part of the problem because Harrison Burton last year, he had a phenomenal run and did great with the team. But then he went to Sam Hunt Racing. And I think that funding and sponsorship, we need to find a way to mix those together where you need to have funding, but also you can be very competitive and you have to be a good driver. And it's frustrating because a guy like Nick Sanchez has the Cup Series written all over it. The talent that he has, he's got Cup Series potential. But the problem is he doesn't have the funding and sponsorship. Spire was funding him. And I know there were rumors about him going to the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series full-time with Spire this year. Of course, like I said, that did not end up happening for the 2026 year, which is stupid at this point. I really hope someone can find a way. Hey, calling. There's a 25 truck available. Let Nick run one of your trucks if he can run for a few events. I think we all would love to see Nick be one of the all-stars chosen to free agents because I think he deserves to be with that team. So maybe they're going to announce him for the next race, which I believe the next truck race I think is after this. It's not Kansas. I think it might be Charlotte or something like that, but I can't remember. Actually, no, it's Texas, the next Truck Series race. So maybe Nick Sanchez, who got his first truck win, or nearly got his first truck win at the track, will be the one chosen. Who knows at this point? Nonetheless, I hope Nick Sanchez can find a ride, but it seems like the future of AM Racing is very uncertain. I'm not sure if he's going to be with AM Racing anymore, as the team is very much on the ropes currently at the moment, if they're even going to still be around at this point. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Cletus McFarland. As it was announced earlier today that Cletus McFarland is not approved and has been denied the opportunity to run the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series race at Talladega Super Speedway. What was said in the video that Cletus put out is that he is going to be required to run more Truck Series races and ARCA Menard Series before he can be approved to run in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series races at Super Speedways at Daytona and Talladega. Now, one thing that does need to be clarified, he is not barred from running in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series altogether. He can run short tracks and road courses in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. So tracks like Bristol, tracks like Dover, I believe, tracks that are under 1.5 miles, I believe he is eligible to run. So he basically can run some of the shorter tracks like your Martinsville, your Bristols, your Dovers, your Richmonds, for example, or even tracks. I think Gateway might be part of that, but I can't remember if he's eligible to run Gateway at this point. But tracks like that, he can run road courses like Watkins Glen and those tracks currently at the moment. Now, NASCAR did release their statement as well and put it out on the Holler Talk as well. NASCAR's EVP John Probst basically spoke about this still being approved for only short tracks in O'Reilly Series and all tracks and for trucks in ARCA. He says, we're all huge Cletus fans. We all watch his videos and are certainly very appreciative of everything he's done in our sport and will continue to do in our sport. He's approved right now for the O'Reilly Series short tracks, which means he's good for ARCA, all for truck, and then O'Reilly up through the short tracks. We like to see more out of Cletus in the short tracks, so we're not saying no, but there is more than we would like to see out of Cletus before we had approve it for Talladega Super Speedway. The reason that Cletus McFarland is not being approved and has been denied for running the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Talladega is because how much he struggled in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Rockingham. Look, I think we all kind of expected going into his debut that Cletus likely was going to struggle quite a bit in his O'Reilly debut. He's never driven this car outside of doing a full day of testing and was way out the pace quite a bit in the race. He ended up finishing in 32nd position, 6 laps down, in equipment that probably should be going out there and competing. And if any other driver was behind the wheel of this car, like a Natalie Decker, for example, or even Hailie Deegan, you would have a lot of criticism, or even Chris Wright. If he ran this bad in the car, there would be a lot of criticism thrown his way. But Cletus does have a lot of fans. Now, I'm a big fan of Cletus McFarland, Cletus McFarland, I was very happy to see him run well in the ARCA East race. He did a phenomenal job in that race, and I truly think that's the series where he does need to learn. But the good news is he is not disallowed for running in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. He can run some of the shorter tracks in the O'Reilly Series. Now, he did mention in the video that he does have more Truck Series races that are scheduled for 2026, and he's also planning to run a lot more ARCA events in 2026 as well. He did mention in the video, basically his video when he released it, he says it's kind of like a kick in the nuts, but he also did say that he understands NASCAR's decision, and he basically is kind of handling this very, very well. Look, would have been really cool to see Cletus McFarland race the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Talladega. Absolutely, I think that would have been a huge deal, and had he been approved, I think he would have had a chance and opportunity to start in the top 5. But let's be real and honest with ourselves. After the struggles he had at Rockingham where he spun out on his own and ran in the back of the pack, I think he's out of his depth, and I think he needs the experience. But say what you want to say about Cletus, he does bring a lot of eyeballs in the sport and does bring a lot to NASCAR altogether. And I want to see Cletus McFarland be in the sport for the long term. I think everybody really wants to see Cletus McFarland be part of the sport long term. But I don't think he's ready currently at the moment. But the good news is, by the end of the year, he is going to have a lot more experience because you have to remember this. He's only ran like 7 or 8 ARCA Menard Series races. if you include the East race that he ran. He's only ran one Truck Series race and ran one O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race. He needs more experience because most of the time drivers have to take their time. And we've seen other drivers that have not been allowed to run even in the Cup Series. We talked about it last year of Mike Wallace, who was disallowed from running the Daytona 500 because he had not ran a stock car on an oval in over a decade. I mean, Jennifer Jo Cobb, who tried to make a couple Cup Series starts, she got disallowed in 2021 with Rick Ware Racing. And other drivers have been disallowed, and there's been questions on the approval process as well. I think it's good that NASCAR is realizing, hey, we love Cletus being in the sport, and we want to see Cletus have success and be around. And I think Cletus brings a lot to the sport. And I think Cletus has actual natural-born talent and does have talent than most people in the world. But what Cletus proved to a lot of us is that it's not easy to be a stock car driver. You always hear those jokes about people saying, oh, these guys are just guys driving in circles and going left. It's very difficult to be a good stock car driver. There's a lot of technicalities, a lot of things you have to learn, and Cletus has even had to learn about it. I mean, I think someone mentioned they even know what inside meant, which is something that a lot of stock car drivers need to learn. And I think live pit stops are a big thing because in ARCA you don't have live pit stops currently at the moment right now, which I think is something that does need to change for ARCA Menards competition especially. But when I look at this at this particular point for this stuff, I think NASCAR had to come in and say, hey, look, we like Cletus. We want to see Cletus in the sport long term, but we need to see what he can do in the lower series. I'd imagine that Cletus will probably make a few more, or I would imagine he'll probably run some of the short tracks. Bristol seems like that's not on the schedule. They're not having the entrance, so Bristol's not going to be possible. Maybe he runs the fall Bristol race into 33. I think he'd actually run better because he actually has a lot of experience racing at Bristol, especially since he has an ARCA starter too. He's going to be running the ARCA Series race there. He's got the Kansas race coming up. He's going to have the Talladega Super Speedway race. His buddy Squirrel McNutt likely will be approved for that if he runs really well at Kansas because he's, I believe, been approved for Kansas, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. If he's not, let me know in the comments below. But you can't just jump from basically racing a little bit and then go up. It's not that easy. It's going to take time for him to learn. And I want him to basically respect the journey and go through the journey. I don't want to see him jump up and do all these big jumps and then ruin his time in NASCAR. I want to see him learn and grow. I think he's doing that. I think RSR is going to do what they can to try to make him better, and I totally respect what they're trying to do to make Cletus a better race car driver. But again, it's not easy to just jump from being a driver in the mid to back of the pack and then basically go up to front. It's going to take time. A lot of these guys that he's racing against have been racing stock cars for 10 plus years and racing for a long time. Cletus has been only doing stock car racing for like a year at this point. But as he gets more experience, he is going to be a better driver. I wanted to learn. I'm glad NASCAR is basically coming in and say, hey, look, we want to see you complete the journey. Because you look at the numbers on the stream, especially they had 47,000 consistently and 60,000 were basically down there. And on top of that as well, there just was a lot of good things that came from that within the people watching, but the race he had wasn't as great. So I think NASCAR did make the right call and right decision to not go ahead and allow him. He's been denied the opportunity to race at Talladega, and he'll have to just get more experience and learn so he can eventually get approved going forward. I really would love to see Cletus down the road get the chance and opportunity to race in NASCAR's top series, and he will get the chance to run more trucks. I'm glad to see he's likely going to do that, but he needs more experience to try to grow and develop his skills in NASCAR, in my opinion. So that's for today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so that if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go to more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. You think NASCAR made the right call to not approve him for the race at Talladega? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about other things we talked about, like Nick Sanchez's future being in question? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We're going to have the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race fix for this weekend at Bristol dropping tomorrow. Then, of course, on Thursday, have Cup race fix for Bristol dropping and the paint skin video dropping. Then on Friday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video drop most likely, and we're going to have the review for the Craftsman Truck Series race. Then Saturday, have the review for the O'Reilly Auto Parts race and have Cup qualifying reactions. And then on Sunday, starting lineup video for the Cup Series race and the race review. Then Monday, we should have a news video going out, as I believe we're going to Kansas next week. Really looking forward to that and excited, as I went there last time. It was a great event and fun to go to. Got a lot of content coming on people like Haley Deegan, Shaman Gisbergen, Carl Arts, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bolas, Ross Chastain, Charlotte Chris, Sam Mayer, Frankie Muniz, Cletus Yvonne Dodge, Ram, Tony Stewart, Case King, Gray Biffle, Brad Keselowski, Connor Zilch, Junior Motorsports, Daniel Suarez, Daniel Dye, Alex Bowman, Corey, I'm Corey LaJoy. All the good stuff. Talk about all these things on the channel in the coming days and weeks as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.